Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a very interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Oeser F22 Production Kickstop. If you're like me, you may have seen this at retailers, and by the way, this is available. I will link it right down below so you guys can check it out. If you're like me, you may have seen this and thought, okay. Yeah, and you know what? I get that. I was right there with you until I actually handled it. Oh my goodness, this thing is so much better than I thought. It was just so unassuming, right? It just took such a straightforward profile, and I thought, oh, it's okay. I feel like I've handled something like that before, but I was wrong. So I can't wait to share the details of this knife with you guys. It's linked down below. It does help my channel use my links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to Sierra_bound, my buddy Scott, for loaning this to me for review. If it wasn't for him, I never would have known how cool this thing was. This will be going back to Scott when I am done. I don't get to keep it. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. This is his Instagram, by the way. Before we get into the details here, let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. It is definitely bigger than I thought it was going to be, which for me was a plus. I understand size is a preference, but this is very nearly an 8-inch knife, about 7.85 inches overall, absolutely a 3.5-inch blade. Cutting edge is coming in at about 3.25. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. So you can see here, it's definitely not small. I thought it was more the size of this, but it's quite a bit bigger, right? Kind of right in between. Let's go ahead and put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Once again, closer to the larger knife here in the comparison. How about up against the Demco 80 20.5, more slender but definitely longer than the 20.5. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Bug Out, which I think the profile is closest to the Bug Out profile. And then put it up against the Benchmade Reptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. All right. So how is the action on this guy? Let me tell you. How do you deploy it? I'm pretty sure you flipped it, right? I'm sure you guys already know. Or I'm sure you guys always know. A lot of you know way before I actually review these. This has you can see there what's happening with the flipper tab. And let me just give you the information that Scott gave me here. The F22 is a classic model in Jared's line. It is powered by the Lee Williams Kickstop and made by Riot Knives. So if you didn't know, this is a production knife made by Riot. Kickstop is Lee's sole authorship patented design that delivers maximum drive to the blade when flipped. When in the open position, sorry, I'm tilting this to get around what I can see on my screen, which are the grid lines and the control buttons there. The flipper tab is hidden, which is really cool. Once you experience Kickstop, you will be hooked. This exclusive version features a hand ground satin, blah, blah, blah. There's different variants of this. What he's saying there is true. It sounds like, well, how much different could it feel? It just is. The first time I flipped this, number one, it's really cool that we have a sub frame lock underneath, and this is the same. Like this is a more exotic version of this knife that has the gold camo carbon fiber. Which, God, Scott, you picked like the best looking one. Of course, I love the black and the bronze, but if you're not all about this aesthetic, they have different variants. Micarta variants, they have full titanium variants, and it's not an exposed frame lock. It's still a sub-frame lock or a countersunk or recessed frame lock, which is really cool. On a narrow frame, that's important because it allows you to keep your finger off of the lock bar and you don't have to worry about if you're putting pressure in the wrong place. This does actually flip the blade harder. It doesn't make sense to me exactly how, but the energy that's transferred from the flipper tab is it's a lot of recoil. You can feel every last little bit of power in that. I love that this rests almost as just like an extension of the blade tang right here, right in line with the liners. But as the blade comes around, it pushes the flipper tab back out into this position here. This is cool because when the blade is out, you do not have a flipper tab in the way, which means you can get right up behind the blade if you need to, do some of those cuts where you really need to put a lot of power right there, right in front of the sharpening choil. It also, I think, makes the entire thing look better. Of course, you can't get around the flipper tab being exposed in the open position, but I don't find that to be much of a problem with this being such a narrow frame. I cannot emphasize enough how satisfying the flipping action is on this knife. And, you know, coming from somebody who, let me remind you again, I don't know if I remind you guys enough, but I've got 3,000 uploads. I've handled a lot of knives. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying factually, I've handled a lot of stuff. And let me tell you, perfect flipping action has become a pretty boring topic. Like, you can get perfect flipping action in a Civivi for like $50 nowadays. This really does feel better. This really is cool. It's the first time I've ever experienced this. And the action is just wonderful. Going down into the close position, just a little bit of encouragement to get it down there. Feels very Riot-esque, which anybody who's handled a Riot knife knows that means it feels very smooth and consistent and will likely break in a way. It will break in a way that will only increase the satisfaction of the object, right? So if you're a stickler for stuff like this, boy, is that crispy. That is, ooh, chef's kiss. Ugh, it's getting cringy, sorry. But man, it's just really, really awesome. I love the action on this thing. It's just beautiful. Let's go ahead and do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here it's actually a little bit thinner despite the scales being contoured, which is a really cool bonus there. Let's go ahead and do length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see here this guy is very narrow, a very compact profile, even including the flipper tab. It is nowhere near as tall as the hump on the PM2 or Para 3. And closed, it's really only just a little bit longer than the Para 3. This is going to be an absolute joy. In fact, for a lot of people, this is going to be, it's going to check a lot of boxes. People who have tried smaller knives, who have tried thinner knives, who have tried bigger knives, and trying to find that sweet spot. This knife, you could say this about any knife technically, but this knife will be an absolute sweet spot for a lot of people. And I don't say that too often. I'm real careful about that. But this knife and the profile and the blade length and the blade to handle ratio and the blah diddly do, and I'll talk all about that, it really is going to nail it for a lot of people. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness here real quick before I start talking about ratios and weight and all that. Balance and blah, blah. Blade stock thickness, what is that? 125, that's my guess. 125, nope, it's going to be closer to 115 thousandths. It's 117 thousandths, probably my crappy calipers. Probably 115 thousandths on the stock. In this case, we are looking at carbon fiber with titanium liners, or well, for the frame lock. And then for the blade, we are looking at M390. I don't know why I was second guessing that, but M390 for the blade, which is, you know, fine. I think this is a great profile and edge geometry for M390. We'll talk more about that. And it's kind of, you know, it's kind of what you expect on stuff like this. What I'm saying is that the weight will vary. If you get the titanium version, right, the balance is going to be a little bit more butt heavy. On this particular one, the micarta and the carbon fiber, the balance is going to be about here, which is not quite right behind the pivot. It's about right here. Normally, I think you're going to be holding this knife like this, but it really doesn't feel heavy, which is normally why I, you know, why I even take a measurement of, you know, or give my opinions on balance in the first place. Let's go ahead and weigh it. This particular one, I don't have the titanium one to weigh, but I think it's safe to assume that the titanium one will probably add half an ounce or so, given this profile. 3.35 ounces for 3.5 inches of blade. I'd say the ratios on this knife are essentially perfect. The balance is not exactly perfect, but my goodness, is it close. This is really, really great. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check on this guy, or at least we're going to check the hardware that is fully exposed. I would venture to guess that there's at least one additional screw underneath here. Even if that is the case, no big deal. The titanium ones will probably be the same given how they are constructed with the lock. Your body screws are, I believe, a T8, and yeah, that appears to be the case there. And then your pivot screw, actually, you know, it might actually be just a little bit bigger. Let's go ahead and try a T10. Is the pivot actually a T? It is. Is the body screw? Surely not. No. T8 for the pivot, and then, I'm sorry, T10 for the pivot, and then T8 for the body screws and the pocket clip screw. The construction is very simple. Nothing that you should be unfamiliar with. This will be a very easy knife to take apart and maintain, should you choose to do that. Have we done everything there? I think we have. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes. This is a super handsome knife, and I think is the perfect combination of, traditional meets modern. We have the shield, crest, right, whatever you want to call that we often see on traditional slip joint and lockback style knives. I think that's a really classy touch, and it's a nice shape that is not, unappealing. It looks like a shield. It looks like a tower shield, which is really cool. The varying, materials that you can get, there's different colors of micarta, titanium, and I think different, maybe you can get them anodized bronze or this or that. There's a ton of these are available. This is a ridiculously underrated knife, but it just looks really good. And because it's Riot, the inlay work is just perfect. I also like, of course, it's contoured. The edges are knocked down. While this does not create any specific lock-in, it is nice and open, and God, is it comfortable. It's just nice. You don't have to think like, oh, I gotta get my hand in a thing, and I gotta get my hand perfectly, positioned to get ready for the cut that I'm about to make on my Amazon package. I don't have to do that. You just hold it and cut with it, right? Obviously, if you're working in a wet or slippery environment, this is not ideal because, like I said, there's no lock-in. There's also nothing guarding your finger from the cutting edge. So this is more of a, not really a knife that you want to go out and use in the Amazon while it's raining, right? And you're cutting whatever with bare hand. I don't know. That's an unrealistic example. But general EDC, getting it out of the pocket, something I used to cover all the time, something that is really important when it comes down to an EDC knife. I understand that this is vastly more expensive than your common, general purpose EDC knives, but for people like me who do like to spend a little bit more money and get something a little bit more special, even if it's going to be doing the exact same work that a cheaper knife would do, what is ultimately the most important thing when it comes down to a convenient cutting tool is exit of the pocket conveniently and easily without having to fight it. Easy deployment. This will not fail. I don't think it's possible. I literally don't think that this is possible. Minimum, yeah, I can't. It's going to deliver maximum energy every single time. Deployment, positioning your hands easily and conveniently, almost mindlessly. You don't want to dedicate any extra brain capacity to this movement. Position your hands for the cut, make the cut, disengage the lock, put the blade away, and put it back in your pocket. Few moves as possible, and without having to dedicate any extra brain power to it, right? Just enough to keep your hands safe, but not so much that you're fiddling around with it and you can't get the task done in a timely manner, right? This does that perfectly. It's just great, right? If you were to add more lock-in lines, it would take away from the aesthetic, right? They have balanced that very well. So it looks good and it is very convenient to use. And there's enough real estate here that I feel comfortable and confident. You can actually choke quite a ways up or quite a ways back. There's really a lot of room. This knife is definitely bigger than I thought it was going to be. This particular knife has the hand rub satin finish on it, which is nice. I think they probably have a standard belt satin finish, and they probably also have a tumbled finish too. I'm honestly not really sure. Maybe they even have black ones. I didn't look that into it in terms of like the variations. You can look for yourself. The links will probably include all the available variants, right? Pick your poison. This has a flat that carries out roughly 75% or so the length of the blade, and we have a very subtle swedge up there. This is really cool. Look at how that comes to sort of almost like a sparrow tip, I think it's sometimes referred to. I don't know. It reminds me of the sparrow grind from the rare Sparrow XM18, right? Other than that, it's a very traditional drop point blade with a little bit of belly. It does come down to a relatively thin edge. It's not an absolute, like, holy crap, it's the thinnest thing behind the edge that I have ever felt. But it is absolutely thin behind the edge as far as like your general pocket knife goes. It's not going to be an Openo. It will slice, it will cut, it will do what you need it to do. And I think it's an appropriate geometry for the M390 composition. There is a nice, pretty large sharpening choil there, so it should make sharpening pretty easy over time. This is not going to be, as far as like sharpening M390 goes, it's not the most fun blade material or blade composition to sharpen, but the simple curvature of the edge will help out and make that a little easier. The final cutting bevel is perfectly even on both sides, as is usually the case with Riot. You can see the Kickstop logo right there, and actually if we can zoom in, I think it says Lee Williams. Yeah, right there. So there you go. Pretty cool. I am unaware of the other models that utilize this thing, but now I am interested, right? This was a learning experience for me. Let's see here. Oh, there is plenty of room, despite the lock side, or I'm sorry, the show side scale is not cut lower than the lock side. There is plenty of room to get your finger in there because they have carved out a little slot right here and a little slot over there, and they have not made it sharp, which means you can sit and flip this thing to your heart's content while you watch whatever on Amazon or Netflix or Disney or whatever it is. I mean, or watch other knife reviews like you're doing right now, right? You've got a knife in your hand and you're flipping it while I know that's what you're doing, right? You can do this to your heart's content. It's not going to wear out your fingers, right? And if you're just going to use this as a simple EDC knife and you're not going to get out unless you need to, cut something, well, then it's convenient and simple for that as well. Let's take a look at the rest of the knife. Oh my gosh, where's the lanyard hole? Who cares? There's no lanyard thing at all. The backspacer sits flush, but I think it's my imagination. It sits flush with the liners, and it looks really good, right? No matter what setup you get of this knife, it's just going to look good. Pocket clip is absolutely ideal, in my opinion. It is not completely and totally deep, but it is not, more importantly, it's not shallow. I legitimately hate shallow carry clip. I do not want this much knife sticking out of my pocket. I don't care what type of tactical advantage I have. It means nothing to me. It can mean something to you, that's fine. But I hate shallow carry. So the carry depth is great. One screw, it's actually recessed into, in this case, the carbon fiber. It will be whatever material you choose. We have a slightly contoured but straight pocket clip that does not create any hint of hot spot whatsoever. It does follow the spine, which is not something that I normally like, but because the profile is so narrow and straight, it doesn't really matter. The bill is just a slight ramp, which means it's going to rise to meet most pocket seam thicknesses and slide over. In pretty much any case, no matter what material you choose, it's going to be a smooth transition in and out of the pocket. The stop pin is, let's take a look here and see what we are looking at. That stop pin is actually located, I don't know if we're going to see it, it's actually back down here, and it rides in a channel and stops the blade both in the, oh, you can see it right there. Can you see it? Can we see it in there? Let's get, right there, that little bar under there. It stops in the open and closed position, which is nice. It's totally housed on the internals of the knife. Lockout. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. Lockup percentage right here. It's a very healthy percentage. You can see there's a lock bar insert, but this is coming in a little bit later, something like 60% or so, which is fine. It does have that lock bar insert, and so the surface contact is more than enough to keep it stable. No lock stick, no double clutch or anything like that. You can see here from this area to this area, the detent ball is well up on the face of the blade, which means you can turn it and let it fall right down into the closed position. No pivot lash whatsoever, very consistent in here, and a nice click into the closed position, which is exactly what we want to see, with perfect centering and no detent lash. Boy, this is good. So what do they come in at? They're expensive. $375, which is a lot. If you're going to cross into the $300 territory, that's the base price. This one that you're looking at here was much more expensive because of the finish and the finish on the blade and the material on the scales. The basic ones, some of the basic micarta and titanium ones, I think come in at $375. If you're going to cross over, because you can definitely get a nice high-end Chinese production knife in the $200 to $300 range. I know roughly what I expect in that range, right? It's not anything too insane, but there definitely needs to be certain boxes checked, right? This has all of those boxes checked, like, titanium frame lock flipper running on bearings or subframe lock, right? With really, really good fit and finish. We want the good materials, right? We want the flag, the special, the M390 and blah, blah, blah. There's lots of blade materials that would have worked, but M390 definitely passes, right? We want that extra attention to detail, but we want the milled clip. We want the, in this case, the backspacer helps out with that. In this case, the unique element is not just the amazing execution of these materials, because you can definitely get these materials for less money, but the execution of them is absolutely there. But the unique element of that kickstop flipper is really cool, and I love how it's hidden in the closed position. Absolutely a little bit more went into this than your typical high-end production Chinese folding knife. And I can't really say I'm too upset about that price tag. It doesn't blow me away, and it's not like, oh my gosh, the value is absolutely off the charts, and I've never seen anything as competitive as this. No. but it's also not offensive, right? This version goes for more, but the base price on them is pretty good. You are getting a lot in this territory. There are definitely other knives to consider. Absolutely. I'm not going to pretend like it's the very best thing, right? But it is a viable option. And on top of that, it makes for an incredible EDC knife, as long as it's legal, right? The blade length is legal where you live. But this is going to appeal and work for a lot of people. People who like smaller knives and people who like bigger knives, right? This is just going to work. It's a safe profile, but it's just cool. Like that extra little cool factor. That's what we look for when we're spending. We can get a knife, right, for barely anything. We can get a good knife for barely anything. If you're going to spend more money, you want the cool factor. You're not necessarily paying for better performance in this territory. You're paying for cool factor, right? And for the work that is involved in that cool factor. It's not like, oh, it's cool factor, so it's automatically more money. No, there is extra work involved in it. There's extra cost involved in it, right? It is cool. It translates. I like this. This is extremely recommendable. It's going to go on my most recommended knives playlist. I think you should check this out. I think this is a severely underrated knife. And while these are sitting there in stock, I think you should take advantage of it. I love this thing. I really do. I think it's awesome. Thanks so much to Scott for loaning it to me for review. Like I said, links for this guy right down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.